My talk's called Making an NFC Jukebox, or Why I Like Building for Kids. My kids specifically. So I love music. And the nice thing about having kids is like you can make them like the same things that you do, kind of through brainwashing. So I made my kids love music just by constantly playing music in our house. We have 2 turntables. I have a cassette deck. I think the only CD player I have is in my car. But we have lots of physical, tactile ways to play music in our house. So this is my son with, using my big, nice headphones with my phone. My daughter with her wireless headphones that she uses, just walks around the house listening to stuff. And then this is my son when he started to get into my cassette deck and just sitting there listening to music, which is how I remember listening to music mostly. Very tactile. There's not screens. There's nothing else going on. You're just sitting there listening to music. Maybe, you have the liner notes in front of you and you get to read those. But so I kind of wanted to create that for my kids. So I had some goals for this project. No screens. Screens are great. My kids get all the screen time they want, basically, it seems like. It wasn't like a main goal to limit their screen time. It was just like when they're listening to music, they don't need to be holding the iPad and doing it like, they should be able to listen to music other ways. I also wanted to make them something physical, like kind of how I used to have with CDs or tapes or the way I have records now. I'm actually old, but not quite old enough where I owned records the first time, just this time when they kind of came back into style. I wanted to keep it somewhat simple. They're kids. My kids are 4, 8, and 10, about to be 5, 8, and 11 soon. So the simpler I can make it, the better. And then keep it about the music, and it has to be able to play everything. Songs, albums, playlists, Baby Shark on repeat. If that's what they want, that's what they can get. Eventually, they might like the music I like. I've not been able to brainwash them into that. They still like music that I don't like and say that I have boring dad taste, which I do, to be fair. So this wasn't like a specifically new idea. I had seen projects like this on the internet before. Someone started this project, I think maybe 7, 8 years ago, called Vinyl Emulator. And then someone else forked it, kind of like soft fork, into something called Node Sonos NFC, which used new NFC card readers. And then someone else made their own Sonos controlling HTTP API, so you could control all this stuff. So all this is backed by Sonos because it's kind of like an open, not super open, but you can reverse engineer all the proxies and stuff that they use to get your music playing. And this is just how this project ended up, where it ended up being very expensive and inconvenient, but that's kind of the point. So I just decided first, let's give it a shot on these things these other people created, and kind of go through user testing with my kids. The first thing they did. And I'll get to pictures of all this in a second, but you basically tap an NFC card and it starts playing music. That's the UX, that's the UI of this. So you can imagine a kid just tap. If it takes more than 100 milliseconds for them to tap, 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 it's not as fast as an iPad, where you tap the screen and it starts playing. So they did not like that. It caused requests to queue up unexpectedly, maybe it worked, maybe it wouldn't, maybe it would play the next thing 30 seconds later or something after they'd already tapped it a bunch of times. So I got a lot of QA, user requests, playlists don't work. My Taylor Swift albums shouldn't shuffle. I don't care if I already had it on shuffle. Taylor Swift should never shuffle. Phineas and Ferb, if I play Phineas and Ferb, it should repeat forever, obviously. These are the things, that you get when that's me watching my kids test this product. I was just like, oh God, this is going to be more work than I thought. So I ended up to better control the stack, I ended up rewriting all of it myself. And this was a few years ago before I was really using AI. So most of this code is still hastily written, but just all by me. So it's probably not good. I mean, it's not good. I have looked at it. It's not good. But so the first thing I did was recreate the HTTP API, because that's the core of this. HTTP is a good abstraction. Who knew? You can just send requests and things happen. So it wrapped this other library I found called Node Sonos TS, which is they generate and reverse engineer all the Sonos stuff, so I don't have to figure out the exact. It's all SOAP behind the scenes, which I also never really wrote. So I was glad I didn't have to like parse XML and be sending XML requests. It auto discovers all the devices. So my kids, we don't have to like remember the name of the speaker in their room. It just always works like that. Then the other thing I changed was making it to hopefully help with that tap, tap, tap latency problem, is be able to send a bunch of requests at once and process them all in a single place instead of having to wait for round trips each time. And then this I'll get into a little bit later, but it also had a real-time API with server send events, which ended up being a really good thing eventually, even though I didn't know it at the time. So just the code's not super important, but I wanted to show a little examples of kind of what was going on. So this is the API for connecting to Sonos. So this is kind of that ability to have to run multiple actions at the same time and queue them all up. So this is like when you tap a card, it should remove everything from the queue that's already there. Then it should set the play mode to whatever they want. Like this is where it detects if it should shuffle or not. And then add everything that has been passed into the queue, and then finally play it. So this all happens on the server. Should be somewhat or lower latency. It's still not fast enough for them. Sometimes they complain, but it's better than it was. And then we wrap all this in just your standard HTTP API. So this is a post route to the replace queue endpoint, which parses the body in a scheme I have, and then calls that method I just showed you with, whatever we passed in. So now you can correlate, you can do whatever you need to, but hooking it up to Node Sonos NFC was the part that made it actually possible for the kids to tap an NFC card in their room. So what this needed to have was customizable user settings, because as I mentioned, I have 3 kids split across 2 rooms in our house. They have differing opinions on music. Someone wants to shuffle things, someone doesn't want to shuffle things. So the actual NFC client has customizable user settings, and then just passes all the requests through. The client is pretty dumb. It just passes stuff through to the HTTP API. And it also can detect which room it's in through a setting, and just, so people aren't playing stuff in other people's rooms. There's actually like a hidden feature where they could play stuff in each other's rooms, but I haven't told them about that yet. Because it would cause mass chaos. So these are these little NFC card readers you can buy for like $30 on Amazon. And again, this is the code's not that important, but so when you tap it, it just reads all the records off the card and just sends those to the HTTP API, which parses them into whatever, it just is a URL basically, and we'll play that URL. So that part's pretty simple. But so this is kind of, I'm going through some of this pretty quickly because, again, this isn't like the super important part, but I'll spend some time on this slide just to show kind of how it all works. So we have, the clicker up there is on the other, that doesn't matter. So we have the NFC card reader, or the NFC card itself, which taps, and then this is all on a Raspberry Pi, which reads those NFC card taps, sends the request to the HTTP API, which then sends them over to the Sonos speakers. And then you get an acknowledgement back from Sonos saying like it worked or it didn't work. If it didn't work, just nothing happens. And then it sends it back to through the HTTP API, so you get some sort of response saying whether it worked or not. So then the next hard part was like, how did we write these NFC cards? Because if it still takes a bunch of time, like the kids aren't going to be happy about that if they have to back in my day, I had to go to Best Buy to buy CDs. Like they don't want to do that. They are used to having every single song ever recorded on their Apple Music, on the TV or the iPad whenever they want. So there's a lot of apps you can use to write NFC cards. I'm sure pretty much everyone's phone in here can be used to read or write NFC tags. But ideally, it should only take a few taps. So I found this app called Toolbox Pro and made an iOS shortcut. So it'll just, I'll show a video in a second, but I basically, does anyone remember Sam Goody in the mall? I'm like the mall to my kids, where they come to me, make a song request. And so this is Led Zeppelin. So you can see I tap the shortcut, put a card to my phone, and now that card contains Led Zeppelin for my kids, which is one music that we do agree on is good, which is why I use that as one of the less embarrassing examples. And then just to prove that you can actually read the card, here's a different app on my phone. that is used to read everything. And you could see if you can kind of see the text field, like it just contains, plain text of the same URL that Apple Music gave us. So this kind of moves on to the bugs we all ran into. That's how it all works, how it was all set up. But there will be bugs, and there definitely were. That's how I felt most of the time when they would tell me something didn't work. I would just go, "Oh no, how are we going to debug this?" So, I basically became my kid's sysadmin, every parent's dream. These are the things they would say, like playback is slow sometimes, card taps wouldn't register sometimes. So what do? We SSH into our machines. Tell them, could you try it again now? I'm looking at the logs now. So I basically have logs running on my machine. There's two different machines too. There's like a different HTTP, the HTTP server and the Raspberry Pi for the NFC taps are different machines. So I'd be like running concurrent SSH processes, tailing logs to my machine and be like, tap it now, tap it now. This one, you can see like this is an actual error that I'm just debugging, being like, okay, I put some logging in, error processing record. Okay, why was there an error? A lot of these were transient, so like it was just tap again. But I did have to rewrite the code a few times to be like more resilient to not queuing up stuff if it would error, not getting into unexpected states, and just if you tap a new card, clear everything that happened before it, get into keep it as stateless as possible is basically what I learned, because kids, I'm not good with distributed state, and my kids are even worse with it. So this was one of the best bugs I ran into, called the mystery music wake up bug. When I was first writing this, I was kind of like, is there a memory leak here? I don't know, but no one cares about this process. So like, let's just restart it every day. I was using PM2 as the process management. So this is a cron restart for 6 a.m. every day. I was like, what could go wrong? We started getting, the kids would say like, yeah, it started playing music again at like, while I was asleep, right before I needed to wake up for school at like 6. And I was like, oh, there must be like some bug where it's, keeping, before I made it stateless, or maybe there's some state I forgot to remove where, it's queued up in there. Like, how is this request still going through later? Like, I don't know. It turned out my son just would leave the card on it all the time. So the card was just waiting to be read. The read event would only happen once. This is a dramatic reenactment of the card. I wish I would have caught it at the time. And this was also around this time last year when Kendrick Lamar was really big after the Super Bowl. That was his favorite song. So it would just start blasting Not Like Us in the room at 6 o'clock in the morning. The fix ended up being just this. Just changing the event from card.on to card.off. So now when you tap it, nothing happens. You remove the card. That's when the event gets sent. We went through weeks of not, like, it wouldn't happen every day because he wouldn't leave the card on every time. This is the 4-year-old who, I wish I could, like the user testing part of making for your kids is fun, because they, they're not going to do it how you want them to do it. I never even thought that he would just leave the card on it. But going back to the picture, like, it's card shaped. Like, why wouldn't I leave the card on there? It's like, yeah, that's a good point. So I love a good one-line fix where it's just card.on to card.off. I was really glad the library I was using exposed the card.off event. Otherwise, I would have had to write even more code myself. So the other thing there'll be is a lot of opinions. So should playlists be shuffled? Should albums be shuffled? Should single songs be played on repeat forever? Please no. But we had requests for yes. So this is that like replace queue endpoint I showed before, where it's sending the body of this request. And I would actually go like, again, SSH into the machine, edit code and be like, okay, you want your playlist to shuffle from now on. I just was editing these hard-coded constants basically in the requests. And that got tiresome. So I ended up getting, I went too far forward. Putting basically some semblance of user settings. So I still had to SSH into the machine, but there's just a JSON file now that I could set these in instead of needing to go into the code. And I don't have to restart the process anymore. So, but I had one of these set up in my office too, and I never thought there were so many differing opinions about how music needed to be played. I just like to have played how I play, which is not really shuffled, like the album's in that order for a reason, and my kids disagree about that, except for Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift is very important to be played unshuffled. So as I said before, like the main goal of this was keep it tactile, no screens. It was kind of working. The kids were using it most days. I was kind of really excited. Like, what else do you want this to add? Like, what else should this have? They just wanted a screen. They just wanted the ability to see what was playing. And I was like, I didn't want to like give up completely. But this is how I felt. Like I was just like, okay, we'll just go back to the iPad of just like, you could see what's playing on the iPad. It still would sync with the Sonos, but I was like, there has to be a better way. Like if they just want to see what's playing. So I actually had this Arduino in a drawer. I'm sure we all have drawers of Arduinos in our house or at Heatsink Labs that we can just go through at any time. But I had this one that had this little tiny screen. It's probably like 48 pixels by 48 pixels. I could just display text. So as a proof of concept, I wrote a lot of C++, pulled it out from the drawer, and it was using the server send events API that I wrote before. It's able to get real-time playback of like what's actually happening, the name of the song, the volume, the play state. I'm not sure, like, this picture's not zoomed in enough, but the proof of concept worked and it got rave reviews. But this one is called the 𝐸𝐚𝐥𝐼 IoT carrier, which is just a pre-built one. It has capacitive buttons, which are just super janky. Like it was just a proof of concept. It didn't work super well, but this did cause me to dust off my C++, and write, code to read the server send events API, like byte by byte, character by character. And I did write this without AI, but I'm sure there's bugs in here. I'm going to have AI go back and tell me where they are. So adding a full system overview, adding their Arduino in now, you could see that it's getting the server send events API sent to it, so we can kind of see exactly what's going on. And this, for now, this this is good enough for the kids. They just want to see what's playing. My son is a very visual person. It should have made sense to me in the beginning. It didn't at first, but he just wants to see what's playing because he forgets, play an album. He wants to see the name of it, remember it for later. So I do have this like 30-second demo of kind of it all working. I don't know how loud it's going to be, but oh wait, I have to play it on here. The video's not working for some reason. But that's Taylor Swift. And then I'll tap the other card. It's just lagging behind. But if you look really closely, you can see this is the part I was most proud of. The shuffle on the Arduino screen is changing in between Taylor Swift and the Imagine Dragons playlist, because Taylor Swift should not shuffle, but the Imagine Dragons playlist should always shuffle. So that was the part I was most proud of, is like that part worked, the user settings, it all worked. This was kind of like my moment of victory that it all worked together. So this project I've written over the course of like multiple years, and working on it. I worked on it again this week. It had kind of been dormant for a little bit, but I have like a ton more ideas now of things it should do. Like it took everything I had not to just program all week, and I needed to put together my slides. But I really want to make this a single device. I do have that Arduino does take battery power, so I want it to be battery powered. I have another device that is sitting in a drawer that has a bigger color screen now that I've gotten since I first set this up. Customizable buttons, so I don't have to like SSH into settings and set stuff. Like if they want to put a shuffle button on there, want to put a repeat button on there, they can. Better durability. Also, if you look down that screen, it was broken. It had been dropped once without the case on it, and they broke the screen. So that's another thing. And then maybe teaching my kids to solder, because that might be a good idea or a bad idea. So I'll put these slides up. I have a bunch of links of like everything I've talked about here. All the code is open source. You could go grab it. If you want to build this yourself, just come find me. Like I'll tell you what parts to get. I'll build it for you. That's how much I like this stuff. And you can go follow me on Blue Sky or GitHub or my website. But mostly just, come say hi after this, and we'll chat about music and kids.